Alright, welcome back to another RC Works video. Today we're going to tell you what to do when your sewer alarm goes off. So chances are, if you're watching this video, you have a sewer alarm that's going off, or it has been going off, on and off, periodically, and you're trying to figure out what the problem is. So the first thing you want to do is learn how to silence your alarm. And if you've got a control panel, oftentimes the silence button is on the front of the control panel. If you've got specifically only an alarm, which is like what this is, a standalone alarm, then there's like a silence option on that. So we'll show you really quickly how to silence this alarm. And then when it comes to a control panel, there's a lot of different makes and models out there. So no telling if you happen to have an Arenco control panel, but they're all pretty similar. You've just got a button on the front that you would push here to do the silencing for you. Okay, so you've silenced the high water alarm. Now, what next? We need to figure out what caused that alarm, and if you want to make sure that you can save yourself a lot of money, the first step that you want to take from silencing the alarm is prevent anyone from using water in the home. Oftentimes when an alarm goes off, people continue to use the water in the home, finish up that shower, finish up that load of laundry, finish up the dishes, or possibly just maybe it happens on a weekend and you can't get to it until Monday because that's when the septic guy is going to come out and take a look at it. It is critical, if you want to save that $200 or whatever it costs to have your tank pumped in your area, that as soon as that alarm goes off, you cease all water usage. Now in an emergency situation, obviously you're going to have to use some water, but if you want to save money, and you can, then stop using water right away, because what happens is in a septic tank, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, you've got a pump float in most cases, and in a situation where you don't have a pump, you're still going to probably have a high water alarm. And then if you've got a high water alarm, then typically when they set those floats, they're going to set the a little bit of a reserve capacity. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize, specifically if you've got a system that operates with a pump, is that that reserve capacity is also kind of considered the maintenance capacity. So it has to, the liquid level can't be too high that the people who are working on your pump system can't get into the tank and actually see what's going on. If the tank is all the way full to the very tip top when they show up, you're going to have that tank pumped, and where if you hadn't used water, you definitely wouldn't have to have your tank pumped in most situations. Okay, so we've got a mini septic tank here just to give you a brief idea of what your next steps are going to be. Whether you have or haven't used additional water, ideally you catch or you get in here and start accessing stuff closer to when you heard the alarm initially than waiting, because it's going to make it easier to determine. So take off the lid, take a look down inside your tank, and what you're looking for is what the water level is at. Does it look like you've got any floats hung up? Is there anything concerning inside of the tank? Obviously, if you don't have a pump system but you still have an alarm, you're not going to have any floats or pumps to deal with, and you're just basically looking to see, is the water level high? Okay, well, it's not getting to my drain field, or it's not getting to the sewer line like it's supposed to. So immediately you know you've got a problem, and you're going to have to get somebody out there to fix it, whether it's snake in the line or whether it's a collapsed pipe that's going to have to be identified and dug up and repaired, which may involve using a camera. So in those situations, having the water level, as opposed to the water level being all the way to the tippy top because everybody else in the house still needed a shower or what have you, but when you catch it when the water level is much lower on the tank, that guy that's coming out with a snake, that guy that's coming out to replace your pump, all of those can be accomplished when the water level is lower. Those typically can't be accomplished when the water level is all the way up here and there's nowhere to work. So again, you're going to have to pay for that pump to be tanked. But I've kind of, that tank to be pumped, I mix those up. So I've kind of beat that to death just in terms of the importance of getting on it right away. But there is quite a bit that you as the homeowner can do to determine what the problem is, and then you can kind of assess whether or not it's something that you want to take on yourself, or whether or not you want to have hire somebody to come out and do that work for you. So let's take a closer look at the control panel option, and we'll talk about some tests that you can do now that we've got the alarm silenced, now that we've got the water supply cut off, and we're no longer adding water to the tank. Next step is to take a look in the control panel and see if we can identify what's wrong. So if you don't have a control panel, just skip ahead to where we talk about what to do if you only have an alarm, which would be like a gravity system or a pump system where you're operating without a panel. Alright, so inside the control panel, regardless of what control panel you've got, there's going to be a terminal strip somewhere where you've got your floats landed. Now, how many floats you have really doesn't matter, because testing floats is very simple and pretty much anyone can do it. But before we get into testing floats, the first thing that you're actually going to want to test is most panels have what they call an auto off hand or manual auto off. It just depends on who made it, depending on what they call it, but it all means the same thing. So auto means that it's operating automatically using the float switches to control the system. This is where it's normally going to be. Off, of course, we all know what off means. And hand is manual or hand. What that means is it's going to bypass the float switch conditions and it's going to try to run the pump or pumps, depending on what your system is. And by putting it in that manual setting and trying to run the pumps, we're going to be able to determine if, or we're going to be able to rule out or possibly determine if we've got a problem with the pump, or if the pump is okay. Is the pump plugged? Is the pump not plugged? So what you're looking for when you put it in manual is the water level dropping now? So you let it run for maybe a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just depending on, you know, whether you hear the motor running, whether you see the water level starting to drop. And this is going to be your cheapest way to determine if maybe you've got a problem with a float, maybe you've got a problem with a pump, and at least kind of give you some insight as to what you're looking for. So if we get into a situation where we're in manual and the pump's not running, then, and you generally you'll be able to hear this by looking down in the lid of the tank, whether the pump is running or not. If the pump is not running at all, even in a manual position, there's definitely going to be a problem with the pump. So you're going to need to pull that pump out of there and troubleshoot what the problem is. Maybe the pump's plugged, maybe power's not getting to the pump, maybe the pump has died on you just because of age. So there's a variety of things there. And now obviously when it gets to that point, we can help you. Give us a call. We can give you some troubleshooting advice, some additional things to check as you narrow down on what your specific problem is. So this video is an overview, and then if you need specific help, either refer to other videos or give us a call. If you put it into manual and it runs just fine and your liquid level starts to drop, but in auto it doesn't start to drop, that is most likely a problem with your float switches. So what you would need to do is determine which float switch is bad. Typically it's going to be the pump switch, not the alarm switch, because that's what brought you out here in the first place. But it is possible for alarm switches to be bad. Had you opened the lid and the liquid level in your tank was low or at its normal level, you would know, well, maybe I just got a bad alarm float. Maybe it got waterlogged or something along those lines. But if the water was high, you would know that it's probably more likely the pump switch. So to test a switch is actually quite easy, and I can just show you real quick. Alright, so to test a float, what you're going to need is an ohm meter of some sort. So I've just got a Fluke multimeter here, and I've got it set to ohms. And I'm actually using the function that does the sound, so you know when you've got continuity or not. So we're not trying to necessarily take any readings, we're just trying to determine if our float switch is bad. So in a panel you're going to have float switches landed on various terminals. Typically, it's going to tell you what each terminal's float is. If it doesn't say it on the terminal itself, oftentimes there's going to be a wiring diagram of some sort. If none of that's in there, I guess just take them one at a time, undo the wires, and of course make sure that all your power and everything's off if you want to be safe doing this. So all it takes is, when you've got that sound setting configured, is you touch each of the leads together to determine, okay, so we know the switch is open right now. Now if we close this switch and do that same test, we got sound. So we know that in the down position the switch is open, in the up position the switch is closed. We know that that switch is working perfectly. And you can jiggle the switch or what have you and test it more if you want to be more thorough, but basically it did what it was supposed to do. It was on in the, or closed, as I said, in the up position and open in the down position. That's what we're looking for. Move on to the next switch and roll through those different switches, and you may have to actually pull those out of the tank so that you can orient them up and down and determine if they're turning on or opening and closing when they should be. So really easy thing to test, and it's going to let you know if you've got a bad float. Usually in a lot of situations, replacing a float is not very difficult and can save you quite a bit of money if you do it yourself. So if you feel comfortable with that kind of thing, then it's a good way to figure out which float's bad, and then just pop a new one in there, no big deal. Okay, so those are just the troubleshooting basics of a control panel. Now there's a lot more that you could test, and we'll probably get more involved or do a more detailed video of testing the individual components in a control panel down the road. But if you need help in the meantime, just give us a call and we're happy to help you out. So now we're going to move on to what to do if you've got simply an alarm in your system. And we already talked about an alarm in your system without a pump. Now let's talk about an alarm with a pump. Chances are, if you have an alarm box but don't have a control panel, then you obviously don't have the hand off auto or manual off auto settings that the control panel has. So you have to still run your pump manually, or you're going to want to still try to run your pump manually. So the way that works is, you've got a piggyback plug. Let me grab this here. So this is what they call a piggyback plug. So it's got a receptacle on the back of it that will receive a 3-prong plug, and then it's got the 3-prong plug which plugs into the wall. And the way that these operate is, this essentially allows the switch to interrupt the power going to the pump. So what you're going to want to do is bypass that by unplugging the piggyback plug from the wall and then plugging the pump directly into the wall. And so in that situation, the same thing applies as I mentioned with the control panels. If the pump runs and the water level drops, then you probably have a float problem. If the pump does not run or the water level does not drop, you probably have a pump problem or plumbing problem. So at least you're gradually narrowing down what the problems are, and that's a good step in getting the problem fixed. And now, once again, there's definitely more steps that you can take to troubleshoot things further and further narrow things, but we've just given you some of the basic tools to get started. And if you need further help, obviously we're making tons of videos all the time, so check the library. If we don't have anything, give us a call and we're happy to help you out. So now what we're going to do is take a quick look at a drawing that I've put together to kind of explain how the liquid level in a septic tank works, so that you can better understand why it's important to cut off the water supply going to the tank as soon as you hear an alarm, for multiple reasons. So the reason that your septic tank alarm is going off is, in a common septic tank, you've got a high liquid level that whoever installed the system has determined is the point that they want the alarm to go off. So we've got the alarm indicated by this green line here, and when the liquid level gets up to that point, the alarm goes off and notifies you. Now you might notice we've got a black dotted line going across just above the alarm line. Now this would be the point. We oftentimes install an alarm so that you have reserve capacity, and what that means is that the liquid level can actually get up to this dotted line before it starts backing up into the basement or into the house and causing damage to the home or the property. But they set the alarm just below that, so you've got a little bit of time to react. You've got opportunity to run a little bit more water if you had to, but ideally you avoid running water as soon as you hear that alarm go off. Now these blue lines here, these in a pumping system or in a pump system would be your on and off point of the pump, and that's going to be determined, that may not necessarily be that far apart, or they may be farther apart depending on the system. But at any rate, the liquid level in a normal situation is going to alternate between these 2 points, or it's always going to be somewhere in between those 2 points. In a gravity system where you don't have a pump, you just would ignore this off section. Your liquid level would normally just be right here, basically level with the bottom of your outlet. So just to put a little bit of context as to what we were kind of getting into in this video. Okay, so hopefully those basic tips at least got you started and give you an opportunity to save some money if your septic tank alarms goes off. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you got something out of this video, and we'll catch you next time.